welcome everyone to this last class, Sex and the Law of Attraction. We have here pictures of Venus, archetypal classical paintings of Venus or Aphrodite, where the word aphrodisiac comes from, of course. Always portrayed in a naked female form, yet Venus esoterically is a masculine energy and has to do with the mind. Venus is the ruler of the fifth ray of knowledge or science, which is interesting. Venus brings together the pairs of opposites on the mental plane and creates beauty and harmony. And that filters down to the astral plane, where about 80% of humanity are polarized, as Venus, the goddess of love, of sex, and money. These are the kind of the outer expressions. Venus as the ruler of Taurus, for instance, relates to gold and money, but also Libra too, a sign of money and sex. So sex, the great mystery. And I posted 2 links in the chat before of 2 controversial newsletters I sent out in 2017, Sex and Relationships Part 1 and Part 2. The controversy was basically some of the quotes that I sent from the Tibetan about his views on homosexuality. But generally, those newsletters were well received and are a good foundation for understanding these 2 major signs of sex, Libra and Scorpio. Scorpio more well known, more kind of in an infamous sense. Libra less known esoterically. Sex is then seen to be in truth only the relation of the lower nature to the higher self. It is then lifted up into the light of day in order that man may reach complete union with divinity. Man discovers that sex, which has hitherto been a purely physical function, carried on sometimes under the impulse of love, is elevated into its rightful plane as the divine marriage, carried out and consummated upon the levels of soul awareness. It is this great truth which lies beyond the sordid story of sex expression, of sex magic, and the distortions of modern tantric magic. Humanity has stepped down the symbolism and in its thoughts debased sex to an animal function and failed to lift it up into the realm of symbolic mystery. Men have sought through physical expression to produce the inner fusion and harmony which they crave, and this cannot be done. Sex is but the symbol of an inner duality which must be itself transcended and wrought into a unity. It is not transcended by physical means or rituals. It is a transcendence in consciousness. So what comes to mind here too is the fact that the sacral center, which we explored in another class, or the sexual chakra, is ruled by Uranus, which is traditionally the planet of science, which I refer to as the seed of mind buried in the lower chakras, waiting to be raised up to the throat center, the higher chakra. But I'm just mentioning Uranus because we just mentioned Libra, and Uranus is the esoteric ruler of Libra and is exalted in the following sign of Scorpio, because it's this scientific mental energy that brings about eventual control over the astral nature. So just to mention that, we'll touch back on this a few times, probably throughout the class. So we can see the ancient paintings of which are more symbolic of the higher tantra actually, but have been misinterpreted more physically in this Buddhist painting here. And you can find dozens and dozens of books and videos and articles on the tantra that DK refers to. Sometimes it's genuinely, the motive for exploring that is genuine. Other times there are certain spiritual teachers who use it as a with a veneer of a spiritual theme as opposed to the physical enjoyment. So it's a complicated area, yet DK tells us that because Libra is prominent in the planetary horoscope at the turn of last century and this century, that there'll be much experimentation going on in the field of sexual expression, and that's certainly the case. That we've seen more than any other time in recent history. In the lower nature, desire moves to love, the solar plexus to heart. The union of opposites is a reflection of union with deity, the divine marriage. Sex as pure lust is without love, and the unification of the physical and spiritual is what is sought. Addictive patterns repeated through not raising up in consciousness, we discuss in terms of sacrifice of the sacral. That word sacri is related to the sacral center, where one lifts up on the altar, if you like, of not necessarily sexual abstinence, but of that sexual energy per se. When emotional desire comes in on top of the physical urge, then sin, quote unquote, crept in. Since then, mental stages of growth have created an even more serious situation, according to the Master DK, who most of these notes are taken from. There is a book called A Compilation on Sex, which are all the references to sex from all the blue books. It's a little fairly skinny book, but it's about 160 pages, I think, which I sometimes refer to jokingly as a copulation on sex. Bad joke, isn't it? Anyway, the chemical affinity of the animal body and animal magnetism, the cells within that body are behind the law of attraction and repulsion. It's interesting words, isn't it? Law of attraction and repulsion. We refer to a person as being repulsive or very attractive. Those are the two extreme ends of the spectrum, of course. The instinct of sex has its main root in the fear of separateness and of isolation. Very primordial and ancient. That quote is from Treason and White Magic, page 282. Hence the sacral center as the survival center, which relates to sex and money. The procreation of families that can support the parents eventually, all that kind of thinking down the ages has bred large families and created problems in its wake that have led to war, in fact. So here is the basic chakra man diagram that I've been using throughout this course that shows the 7 chakras. The sacral center here, ruled by Uranus, and also Mars and the moon are associated with the sacral center, the moon relating to the procreation of new forms for souls to incarnate in. And the throat center up here, which the sacral center eventually, this white arrow here, is raised to. But there's a continual circulation of these energies between the sacral and the throat. The sacral, the procreative center, and the throat center, the creative center. 6 petals for the sacral center, 16 petals for the throat center. 6, of course, being the number of matter. The sex instinct has worked out and finds its logical consummation in the relationship, consciously realized, of the soul and the body. This is the keynote of mysticism and religion, which is today, as ever, the expression of the law of attraction, not as it expresses itself through physical plane marriage, but as it finds its consummation for man in the sublime marriage carried forward with conscious intent between the positive soul and the negative and receptive form. Positive soul and the negative receptive form. Quite often the reverse is true. The personality is positive and the soul is negative. And so the personality goes upon its willful way, so to speak. Hugh says, can you say something about Mars in the sacral center? Well, Mars, if you look at the astrological glyph, is the upright male phallus. So, as the ruler of Aries, the first masculine sign of the zodiac. So, and of course, the ruler of Scorpio, where the tests of sex are applied. So that's its connection with the sacral center. And, Pluto is also partially related to the sacral, but more so the base chakra, where the Kundalini serpent lays coiled. The problem of sex, dualities of the solar plexus, from promiscuity to the Orthodox Christian view, has conditioned modern thinking from medieval times. Libra as the center of the scales gives a true perspective. Okay, Libra, the center of the scales, in this beautiful painting. That's that poise I was talking about in the meditation today. Be poised and perfect, as the old line goes. When the basic sex relation is established between soul and body, negative and positive, then there will be correct teaching on the subject of physical sex. The experience of East and West must be utilized from the mystical to the scientific, using the medical profession and cultural knowledge of yogis, for example, the sacral center. I mean, as I've said before in the other classes on the centers, you could write many volumes on the chakras. That's something that science has yet to be revitalized and renewed. DK said that the many sexual experiments which will lead to the point of balance at the end of the 20th century, when Libra is powerful in the planetary horoscope. I don't think we've quite got there yet. I think we're culminating that for sure, with especially the last 2 decades of gender ideologies, pornography, relationship breakdowns, and so forth. There has been a definite progress forward into new and untried spiritual realms, yet physical desire is not for humanity the line of progress, ultimately, the Tibetan says. And so we may think of the Krishnas. Some of you may know of the Hare Krishna groups around the world. They practice sex once a month. They leave a whole day for sexual activity. The rest of the month is basically celibate. I could be wrong, but that's what I recall from my readings and also conversations with Krishnas. So, and so this is what DK is alluding to in this statement here. Physical desire is not for humanity the line of progress. Of course, we see physical desire and its satiation to the extreme in this world today, whether it's for sex, extreme sex, or experimenting in all types of different sex, or the desire for wealth, for material goods, and so forth. It all comes from the solar plexus, essentially. There is an animal instinctive reaction within the sacral center that, of course, is you can see as a cause of sex, but for the more evolved, I think there's a mental and emotional quality that that feeds back down into the sacral center. He says once a month for Krishnas is mainly for propagation. Yeah. Libra, the 3 main themes: the law, the universal laws, it translates to earthly laws, sex, and money. And of course, in esoteric astrology, the Tibetan talks about how Libra is important for legislation in the future by about 2035, I think he says, for the safekeeping of children. And this is very important, of course, because we've all become aware of the horrors of child sex trafficking and so forth in these last couple of decades. That is becoming more and more widely known. So these things are all gradually becoming exposed and revealed. And the incoming seventh ray, of course, is activating the sacral center, the planetary sacral center, and the human sacral, and will bring the sex problem to a crisis. Remember I said that Uranus is the ruler of the sacral center? Well, Uranus is also the ruler of the seventh ray, which is increasing in strength on its new cycle that will span the entire Aquarian cycle we're going into for the next 2,000 years on. So the Tibetan says, and this is like 50 or 60 years ago, that currently the planetary sex life is temporarily overstimulated and most likely still is. Other factors having an influence is the sun moving into Aquarius, which Uranus rules, of course, as well as the coming of the Christ. All these factors are causing much upheaval and chaos. The outgoing sixth ray, which is ruled by Mars, of course, has a close association with the solar plexus and the desire nature, which contributes. Combined with the incoming seventh ray and sacral center, makes for a potent mix. Desire of the solar plexus goes straight to the sacral. Aquarius gives a tendency towards fusion in business, religion and politics, and urge towards union, hence the aptitude to sexual intercourse. Aquarius, ruled by Uranus, the ruler of the seventh ray. In Christ, who represents the love aspect, is the higher correspondence to astral desire. Both material desire and spiritual aspiration will be awakened. Puritanical attitudes, however, have caused much guilt regarding sex, instead of being regarded as an instinctual or natural process. Here is the line that we all steer between these pairs of opposites. Christian guilt. So there's the duality where we have the promiscuity of males and their imposition or restraint upon women. Hence prostitution, divorce courts, disease also develops psychoses and psychological disruptions or inhibitions, seriously undermining the health of many men, leading to promiscuity or sterility. Psychoses and psychological disruptions. Through lack of control, an era of disease has been created mentally and physically and will take several centuries to eradicate. This has also brought too rapidly into incarnation myriads of humanity who are not ready, who needed longer interludes between birth. Very interesting statement, is it not? Hence overpopulation, which in many cases leads to war because of partly food shortages, natural occurrences like drought and so forth. The divine plan is towards monogamy. And swans and other bird species like the albatross mate for life. I think it's quite a few decades, like 50 years or something, that some of these birds can live and be together with. And if they lose a mate, they actually find another mate. Very interesting with the swans. The swan being a very esoteric symbol too, by the way, that is used in the Rosicrucian tradition. The situation today is critical and serious and has produced much disease, insanity, evil tendencies and perverted impulses, leading to asylums, crime and prisons, etc. Pretty harsh commentary, is it not? But it is true. And of course, all our entertainment is often, majority probably, is based on some sexual angle. Romantic, which of course is slightly different, but romance, sex, crime, and we have many books on, for instance, Ken Wilber's Sex, Ecology and Spirituality, The Spirit of Evolution, which I believe is a very good read. All his books are. He's a very second-ray, love, wisdom kind of soul. This one here I just found at random. There are many hundreds of them on the internet. Sex and Crime, Oliver's Strange Journey. Or is it, Oliver's Strange Journey. So sex expresses the relation between spirit and matter, as we said, and is very much related to the love or the second aspect, represented by Venus, as I said before, but also Jupiter, the ruler of the second ray of love wisdom. It is an expression of the law of attraction. For many, it is the satisfaction of animal impulses at any cost with no rhythmic regulation. A long-term relationship brings about the rhythmic regulation and the deepening of intimacy between two people, obviously. Plenty of books on the law of attraction, The Ultimate Guide to Attracting Positive Energy, Better Relationships and Wealth. There you have the kind of Venusian Taurus kind of approach. I haven't read the book, but sex is a symbol of inward spiritual reality, the relationship between father-mother, spirit matter, positive, negative, life form. Marriage on the physical, emotional, and mental levels is very rare to find the correspondence on all levels. When all levels are expressing, the ideal right conditions can be provided for souls to incarnate for disciples and initiates. And this is part of the philosophy with most spiritual traditions and the Krishnas that I was referring to before, to attract the right souls that can benefit the most from the parental guidance, parents who bring that soul in, will attract that soul. Love and sex are one and the same thing. Both express the law of attraction. The sexual act is the final expression on the physical plane of the love between two beings. Sometimes we are motivated by love, sometimes by lust. This is a cave somewhere in Europe, which there's a few famous photographs of. Now, where was it again? Possibly Eastern Europe, I think. Love is ever productive and the law of attraction is fruitful in its results. Man and God came together under the same great law and the Christ was born. The guarantee of the divinity of humanity and the demonstration of the fact, Christ being that second aspect, love, wisdom, principle. Man being the third aspect, generically speaking, and God being the first aspect. Individual man and his soul are also attempting to come together, and when that event is consummated, the Christ is born in the cave of the heart, and Christ is seen in the daily life with increasing power. Man, so what that means, that corresponds to, is the first degree initiation, which many thousands, I think, have been going through on the planet for the last 100 years, and particularly in the last, probably last decade, awakening to their true selves, and therefore reversing the wheel and moving from the mutable cross to the fixed cross of love. Man therefore dies daily in order that Christ may be seen in all his glory. Of all these wonders, sex is the symbol. It's interesting, this phrase, dies daily, because that was the famous phrase of St. Paul, who is now the Master Hilarion. He says, he was a Scorpio, and who said, I die daily to the not self. and in fact whose slant of sexuality affected the whole of Christianity. DK has about a paragraph to comment upon that in the book Esoteric Astrology, where his views on sexuality being a somewhat what's the word uh, intense disciple on the path, to put it mildly, gave that spin that modern Christianity took its cue from. The great drama of sex is enacted twice over in the physical body. When the energies move from the solar plexus to the heart, we have a union, do we not? We have two polarities merging, so to speak. Solar plexus down here in this Manipura chakra to the heart, the Anahata chakra. Sacral to throat, procreative to creative. The brain children that are created from the throat center. So sacral, Svadhisthana, up to the throat center, the Vishuddhi. These are all correct petal arrangements too, by the way. True union of the higher and lower energies creates beauty in the form, enshrining some aspect of truth, enriching the world. The great drama of sex is also in the head itself. The Ajna center blends and fuses from 5 lower chakras, the throat, heart, solar plexus, sacral and base. The head center is awakened through meditation, service and aspiration. The soul makes contact with the personality through the head. As I said before, the science of the chakras is very deep and there's much to be revealed yet. Through the numerical examination of the petals of each chakra, what each petal represents. For instance, with the heart chakra and its 12 petals, we have the knowledge, love, and sacrifice petals that are opened in various tiers of petals over thousands of incarnations, which eventually fully opens at the 4th degree initiation, which is also called the crucifixion. Sacrifice petals, the last tier to unfold, and it takes some sacrificial acts to unfold those petals. Okay, well, with the crown chakra, spirit is masculine positive. The Ajna chakra, or matter, is feminine negative. The associated endocrine glands, the pineal and pituitary respectively, are the higher correspondents of the male and female organs of reproduction. Interestingly enough. So here you have the pituitary gland, the anterior posterior, looking like a pair of testicles. And in fact, these lines that come off here, this one here goes down to the testes, the male sex characteristics, the libido, and this other line goes to the ovaries, the female sex characteristics and libido. This one here goes to the breast, this one here goes to the kidney, and so forth. Various other chemical routes that these lines trace. Fascinating science. I mean, the science of the chakras and the science of the endocrine glands together is an extremely abstruse science and quite profound. Probably in the Aquarian age, it will get the attention that it deserves to do it justice. The emanatory fields from the Ajna and crown eventually make contact with each other's magnetic field and instantly a light flashes out. So we have this sexual union, so to speak. The father and mother unite and give birth to the son, the second birth. So the drama of sex is reenacted 3 times. In physical plane sex, in union of higher and lower energies resulting in creative work, that's the sacral to throat. and in the union of the head of personality soul, resulting in the birth of the Christ. So another way to look at this higher tantra is the union of the mental energies and the astral energies that we use in meditation. We have the discipline, the mental discipline of the mind, which of course in the higher mental plane is the seat of the soul, and we have the union with the astral plane, which contributes the imaginative, the visualization and imagination comes from the astral nature. So when we blend the mind and the astral nature together, we have a higher tantra, so to speak, an ability to create something that was not there before. And in a sense, we use that um, in many different meditation forms. Here's a close-up of the pineal gland per se. It's a tiny little gland. It's only about like as big as a pea, but not shaped like a pea. You can see the incredible complexity in this diagram of the pineal gland. All these arrows going off to various other parts of the body. The oculomotor nerve, a nerve that goes to the eye. The trigeminal nerve, whatever that is, the acoustic nerve, the facial nerve. Extraordinary. Can you see the absolute detail in there? And I'm not sure whether it emulates the male sex organ, as was suggested in that quote of DK's, but nonetheless, it's a fascinating thing to study. But the pineal gland is right in here, I think. And this is what surrounds it. I think the hypothalamus or something like that is called behind. Anyway, I'm a bit ignorant on all those medical anatomy terms. Sex and marriage in the future will be based upon, one, the fact that marriage will be part of group life, serving the group good. It will be the result of education in group relations, service, and the law of love. Love will be based upon intelligence and not so much on emotions in the future. This is interesting from the point of view of Libra again, being a sign of marriage and relationships, and its esoteric ruler, Uranus, which I've always maintained if a person is responding to that more so, it's a more group-oriented type of energy. It's a more impersonal and detached energy because Uranus is the personality ruler of Aquarius and has that seventh ray thing going on. Two, on the point of the soul's evolution, right fulfillment necessitates the true integration of the personality. True marriage and the right sexual relation has to be compatible on all three levels. Future marriage will be based upon the same point of evolution having been reached by both parties, the same level of transmutation. So what we have here, we see many imperfect relationships, if you like, that don't live up to that ideal, obviously. People may be emotionally and physically compatible, but not much going on in terms of mental rapport with one another, or the various combinations of all those things. Yet there can be long, loving, lasting relationships and marriages despite that. And that in itself, of course, is a learning experience. Sex and marriage in the future will also be based on point 3, on the desire to provide good bodies for incoming souls. The law of sex is the law of those relations whereby life and form are brought together in order that divine purpose may be seen. Sex is the activity that takes place when the pairs of opposites are brought together, the middle principle. Relation, at one-ment, and birth deal with the true significance of sex. Only in the form life does sex exist as the soul is itself sexless. That's an interesting point. Hence the idea of the form not being a principle. Sex is one of the 4 problems to be solved in the next 2 centuries. death is another. Sex and death are both related too, of course, to Scorpio. We call the eighth house, which takes its meaning from the eighth sign Scorpio, the house of sex, death, other people's money, and all that kind of stuff. So sacrifice and death, sex relates to the sacral center. Sex and death also relate to Libra and Aries. And on the left here, we have your typical kind of thing that you'll find on the internet or in the tabloids. The Scorpio female, passionate, dark, sultry, resourceful, powerful, obsessive. And all these things are true, of course, to one degree or another. But in someone who is perhaps a little bit more advanced upon the spiritual path, those things may have been left behind, and Scorpio is expressing in a different way. Sex and discipleship. Well, first of all, the cartoon on the right, you may not be able to read it. It's a pretty famous one, where the monk here is saying, celibate. I said celibate, not celebrate. I've seen that cartoon in various forms. Anyway, celibacy is not a prerequisite for discipleship. There is no sphere of human activity we cannot act divinely. Life must be lived in a normally rounded out way on all levels. Enforced celibacy is not an indication of spirituality or necessary for esoteric spiritual training. Celibacy is needed in some lives, particularly if the previous life was the opposite extreme. But of course, during the Christian centuries of the last 2,000 years, celibacy was probably expressed to the extreme, which resulted in people having to come back and make balances and corrections over a couple of lifetimes. And also, of course, in many monasteries, there was a lot of homosexuality going on, at least in male monasteries. The stories about that are legion. So where it's suppressed in one area, it will pop out in another area, if you excuse the pun. So the family life is the best training school for the disciple, according to the Tibetan, where there are enforced relations, adaptability, sacrifice, compromise, service, a bringing of the animal nature under rhythmic discipline, the elevation of emotional instinctual nature upon the altar of sacrifice. However, there is no greater service than to provide bodies for incoming souls and their subsequent environment and education. Indeed, and the majority of humanity are loving parents who bring new souls into the world and give them love, attention, and rear them. Of course, many of them make mistakes too, but it's all grist for the mill in human experience, from the very less evolved beginner souls to the most evolved. So family life, enforced relations, adaptability, sacrifice, compromise, service. Indeed, it's quite a huge challenge and sacrifice required to bring those souls into the world, to provide for them, to guide them. Now, there was something else I was going to say about this. Oh, yeah, it was about the Catholic Church. And in fact, not just the Catholic Church, but many of the Christian faiths, and to an extent, other faiths like Buddhism, Hinduism, where an extraordinary amount of sexual abuse has taken place, at least in this last century that we know about. Particularly in the last 20 or 30 years, this has come to light, and is still coming to light, in fact. When I sent out the Virgo newsletter just recently, I got a 6-page letter from someone who recounted her experiences of a Catholic orphanage that she was part of in New York upstate, and extraordinary, horrific account. And of course, we're familiar with these stories that we see in the news and elsewhere. And the Tibetan tells us in one of the many quotes on sex throughout all the blue books, disciples should brook no prostitution of the powers of the body to the grosser satisfaction. Sometimes in the mystical life there is sexual difficulty if previous sexual control has not been learnt. Hence, when there is contact with the soul, the energy goes straight to the sacral center, causing perversions or undue importance with the sexual imagination overstimulated. For the disciple, the sacral center, the basic force of our particular solar system, the force of attraction of form to form is transmuted, and the attractive force of the soul takes the place of the reproductive, creative, material activity. So the mystical life is interesting. It's more about, it's more emotionally oriented as opposed to the occult life, which is more mentally oriented. And as I've been fond of saying throughout this course, we are all mystics learning to be occultists. Here on the left, we have a depiction, one of the most accurate depictions of the sacral center, the six-petaled lotus. And we have various gods within there. We have Shiva, I think, in there, and a two-headed goddess over here, and Makara the crocodile, the mystery of Makara, which is linked to Capricorn and Venus, in fact. But that's a long story we won't go into now. Just to give you a taste of how much there's there waiting for all of us once we choose to explore this subject. Marriage and parenthood. Many of the masters are married or have raised families expressing the highest ideal of marriage. Marriage is the great mystical symbol of the greater inner fusion of mind, emotion, personality, soul. In the future, the deliberate preparation of a constructive thread of light between the parent and child, even in the prenatal stages, will be carefully taught. This is very inspiring stuff, I think. The family unit on Earth is a symbol of hierarchy. In the future, there will be a shift from the quantity of families to the quality and intelligence of families. And for this, the science of eugenics is a distorted and exoteric indication. We've become more aware of eugenics in recent years with people like the Rockefellers and Bill Gates and so forth, who advocate population destruction as part of their ideals around eugenics, which of course is a distorted ideal. An increased birth rate will eventually be regarded as wrong. Many souls are passing away from Earth life, and this will increase in the Aquarian age. The planet can only support so much humanity. Humanity is rapidly gaining personality control, hence the mind will be the major preventative measure. You know, in recent years, in the last few years, we've been seeing these statistics of the sterility in males and females, or the low sperm count, extraordinarily low sperm count in men, and the fact that many people are not reproducing, many of the Western countries particularly. Their populations are dwindling and not reproducing, and at the other end of the spectrum, the longevity and ages of the older population are increasing, which is creating a shortage in the middle of a labour force to run the respective countries. And this all ties in, of course, with the various ideals different groups around the world like WHO, WF, and so forth have about about technical automation which will create even more lack of employment for people. And so the obvious answer is to teach people some spiritual principles and to unleash their creativity, which is happening, of course. Currently, there is a promiscuous use of contraceptive methods. Promiscuity has led to large populations, which in turn has brought on difficult economic conditions, which in turn has caused wars. The sex relation only has one major objective: to produce physical bodies for incoming souls. And, of course, it's very pleasurable. The motives for marriage will undergo profound changes during the next 1,000 years. The basic motive of love between two people will remain unchanged, or more properly emphasized and selflessly expressed. Due to the intelligent mental work of parents, the child will come into incarnation with its light body, the etheric, already embedded and functioning in the physical body. This only happens at the moment with advanced souls. Very interesting, because usually that alignment between etheric and physical body only happens between the ages of 4 and 7 years old. So this basic motive of love between two people, male and female, really alludes to the crisis that has been undermining Western and Eastern cultures in recent years, and that is the falsification of gender ideology, as I've written about many times in my newsletters, of allowing children to make decisions about changing their sex when they're not even old enough to go to a bar and have a drink. This is insane. And for 5-year-old kids to call the shots to their parents to say, I want to be a girl or I want to be a boy, the opposite gender. And of course, the tens of thousands, so I'm not exaggerating here, of girls, of teenage girls who have had double mastectomies, only to find out a few years later that was a very bad choice, and which of course means that they can never get their breasts back. This is insane. This is actually evil incarnate, and has crept into a lot of Western woke ideologies. Excuse me if I sound like I'm getting up on my soapbox here, but it's a very concerning situation, and we're finally starting to get some pushback against that, because it's crept into schools and teaching all around the world. We have kids in kindergarten having drag queen performances, at the age of 5 years old, men dressed as women cavorting around. I mean, this is there's been a big backlash now, thank God, around this. But this has to do with the materialistic forces trying to undermine humanity's basic, the family unit, in fact, because basically what it ends up doing is destroying the family unit. It decreases reproduction and creates a lot of confusion and emotional psychoses for decades. And so the people complicit in this are many in professional fields: politicians, social workers, medical people, surgeons, probably in the hundreds of thousands or millions, who support this. So where is the morality, I say, for a surgeon to perform mastectomies and the other way around with males who want to cut off their penises and have a vagina created for them? This is where we are right now in terms of the pendulum, I think, about to swing the other way in terms of what DK was saying about Libra prominent in the planetary horoscope at this point. So, chakras and sex energy. The sacral center, of course, as we've been talking about, controls the sex life and will always remain a powerful center until 2/3 of humanity have taken initiation. We must procreate in order to provide bodies for incoming souls. The sacral center corresponds to the physical sun, the source of vitality. And of course, the sacral, as we learnt in the chakra class, is linked to the spleen center. The spleen is one of the main receptive centers of bringing in solar vitality and prana into the body. The symbolism of the sacral is like the gestation period prior to birth, where the whole story of conception, form building resides, whether it be a human, an idea, an organization, or a planet. As this diagram here shows us, from the fertilized egg through the various stages, fetus, and so forth. And so we can think of an idea or a thought form that we create, that we gradually develop over a period of time. Is a good analogy for the development of the human body, the gestation period, where as it says before, the whole story of conception, form building resides, whether it be human, an idea, an organization, or a planet. In the sacral center, the whole problem of duality must be solved. The solution must come from the realm of the mind so that a transfer to the throat chakra can take place. 16 petals of the throat center minus 6 petals of the sacral equals 10 petals of perfection, which is the solar plexus amount of petals. And we have all sorts of different combinations where we can play around with these numbers. Of course, this raising of the sacral to the throat happens naturally, physically, particularly in women's lives, where they reach past the age of childbearing, of the so-called menopause, the pausing of men. Sorry, another bad pun. And the raising of energy from the sacral to the throat center, which is traditionally known as coming into the croning years or the wisdom years, because of that throat center being activated. Of course, again, it doesn't necessarily mean the stopping of sexual activity. It's just about the right circulation or emphasis on one chakra or another. And likewise, men around about the so-called midlife crisis, who have had, around about the age of 39 to 42, they've had a family and children, and they seek to prove themselves again sexually. They might have affairs. They're going through a similar thing of a lessening of sexual activity as the forces are raised naturally to the throat center. And in India, of course, there's these traditions. Gandhi is a good example, I think, where him and his wife reached a certain point. I think it was around the 40s, and they followed the traditional path of not so much sexual activity. But Gandhi is an interesting point that DK talks about, where he was one of the people who really suppressed the sexual energy and created problems, not just sexually for himself, but as a leader of a nation. So we see another diagram here. The sacral is closely related to matter, and there is a triangle spleen sacral base, as I mentioned before. So there is the spleen over here where my arrow is pointing, and the solar plexus, the heart center, the spleen, and the sacral center down here, the relations between them. The Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna nadis, these triple lines going up the center here, connection to the ajna center and the head center. Sacral has a relation to the ajna. The two together create a functioning quality which is productive of that supple quality we call personality. The sacral relates to the third aspect, or the mother aspect, the solar plexus to the second or love aspect, and the base chakra to the first aspect, ruled by Pluto, ruler of the first ray. The base chakra is not shown here. It's right down there. So again, the sacral center, the mother aspect, interesting because it's the sexual center, and it is the energy that brings about procreation, physical procreation, of which the mother is the supervisor. Sex instinct is towards unity at a physical level. The innate principle of mysticism is the urge to union with the divine. Pornography is considered by some to be a form of mysticism. In humanity, the solar plexus and sacral centers dominate, hence the desire for mature living and sex life so closely blended. Now, let's see, I've got about 20 slides left. We're probably not going to get through them all, so I don't want to rush through them, but I may skip a couple, or as we've done before, leave some of these pages for you to consider when you look at the video again. This particular page is about transmutation and transference, talking about the ongoing sacral center to the throat center. This page is about Kundalini and sex energy. In many books you can find on that subject. Should a man, by the power of will or through an overdevelopment of the mental side of his character, acquire the power to blend these fires of matter and to drive them forward, he stands in danger of obsession, insanity, physical death, or of dire disease in some part of his body, and he also runs the risk of an overdevelopment of the sex impulse through the driving of the force of in an uneven manner upwards, or forcing its radiation to undesirable centers. The reason for this is that the matter of his body is not pure enough to stand the uniting of the flames, that the channel up the spine is still clogged and blocked, and therefore acts as a barrier, turning the flame backwards and downwards, and that the flame, being united by the power of the mind and not being accompanied by a simultaneous downflow from the plane of spirit, permits the entrance through the burning etheric of undesirable and extraneous forces, currents, and even entities. These wreck and tear and ruin what is left of the etheric vehicle, of the brain tissue, and even of the dense physical body itself. That's from TCF, Trees and Cosmic Fire. Wow. It's quite a damning indictment, is it not? Or a dire warning. And of course, in terms of insanity and madness, I have attended various conferences, one in particular in Australia, where someone was conducting a Raise Your Kundalini workshop, and I could hear a woman running out of there screaming her head off, and it took them all day to calm her down. I think she had to be removed from the conference premises. I mean, these are kind of the things that can happen through people ignorantly teaching some of these practices of premature raising of Kundalini, which of course is only, the Tibetan says or advocates, its natural arising over a period of many lives as it unites with the downflowing forces from the crown chakra. And so playing with the serpent of Kundalini coiled at the base of the spine is literally playing with fire, because you can, as it says here, create this burning of the etheric. Disease and sex energy, likewise, is brought about by failure to work with the law of periodicity, the misuse of the sex urge. The male has broken in on the rhythm, excuse me, of the female body, and this is responsible for being one of the major causes of disease. There has been a mental infringement of these laws on a widespread scale today. And he talks about syphilitic diseases are the remainders of the excesses of Lemurian times, the great mismating, promiscuity, and series of perversions that took place, and also, of course, the bestiality in those times, which led to the production of apes. And Lemuria was practically destroyed itself owing to the misuse of the sacral center. This very young fledgling humanity who didn't know better, really. So this syphilitic disease will be the last disease, the Tibetan says, that will be stamped out. Cancer, he says, is partly the result of the reaction to the diseases connected with the sex life in Atlantis, sex's overexpression or suppression. So yeah, I'm not sure if he's talking about all kinds of cancer there. He most likely is. We discussed this in the esoteric healing class. One of the main sources of cancer as related to the sacral center and therefore to the sex organs has been the well-intentioned suppression of the sex life and of all thought connected with the sex life by misguided aspirants. Sex was evil and wicked in the Middle Ages. Cancer is a disease of suppression. He also says that two decaying astral forms in close proximity to our Earth have a very potent influence on sexuality. He's talking about the decaying forms of planets or stars in the etheric. It produces through the astral tendencies of humanity an instinctual tendency to cruelty and sexual perversion. It was much stronger in ancient days, hence the ritualistic cruelties and horrors of Sodom and Gomorrah. In Lemurian times, the influence was constructive. The lesson of sex and intelligent registering of pain had a place in the scheme of development, similar to hitting children as punishment. Got there. So Sodom and Gomorrah, these two cities in the Middle East, were destroyed by fire. And it wasn't volcanic fire. It was literally fire from heaven that I guess the Manu chose to direct towards those populations. And there is one of the paintings, the many paintings you can find about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and some angels here in the foreground leading away some of the survivors to safety. But this statement here, men and women suffer from cancer. The general causes are not identical, but the basic cause is a reaction from an overexpression of the sex life. Of course, we have breast cancer and cancer of the organs of reproduction in both male and female. But cancer anywhere in the body, he's suggesting here, may be the result of cause of a reaction from an overexpression of the sex life. And we have sex addiction. Recently, of course, Russell Brand, who is getting totally besieged by the legacy media at the moment, who has admitted to all his sexploitation or sex capades and sex addiction in his previous life over 20 years ago, is another of the addictions that have emerged in the last 20 years and that people are working with. And it's a very healthy thing for people to come out and share their experiences and to move out of that addiction loop. Homosexuality was left over of sexual excesses of Lemuria. In my second newsletter that I gave you a link in the chat, in 2017, the one on Scorpio, has all the quotes by DK on homosexuality. So I'm not going to linger on that now for basic lack of time. But you see here on the old Grecian vase, homosexuality depicted, and the reasons for homosexuality, the rare cases of hermaphroditism, male and female sex organs. I'm not going to go through this one, but just to leave you enough time if you want to go back through the video and read it all. True homosexual is a guarantee of a distant racial and evolutionary achievement when the world cycle will have been run and two separate halves again emerged in their essential unity. Divine hermaphrodites, the true androgynous man, perfected human being. So he talks about the word homosexual being a misnomer. We have rays and sex energy, many carvings of throughout different cultures and religions and sex. The different rays, the incoming seventh ray, the outgoing sixth ray. Scorpio, as I said before, a sign infamously associated with sex, and of course Mars. Christianity, ruled by Mars and a militant celibacy regarding sex as evil. Libra, as I mentioned before, also Sagittarius. Divas and sex energy. The mystery of sex. And I just want to finish up on this one because it's so profound. This is a quote from Cosmic Fire. The moon chain, which is the chain before this earth chain, of course, as we explored in another class, has in itself a curious occult history not yet to be disclosed. This differentiates it from other chains in the scheme, etc., etc., etc. It says the sexual misery of this planet, interesting phrase, finds its origin in the moon chain failure. The progress of evolution on the moon was abruptly disturbed and arrested by the timely interference of the solar logos himself. The secret of the suffering in the earth chain, which is now, our chain now, which makes it merit the name of the sphere of suffering, and the mystery of the long and painful watch kept by the silent watcher has its origin in the events which brought the moon chain to a terrific culmination. Conditions of agony and of distress such as are found on our planet are found in no such degree in any other scheme. The misuse of the vibratory power of a certain center and the perversion or distortion of force to certain erroneous ends, not along the line of evolution, account for much of the moon mystery. Certain results, such as the finding of its polar opposite, were hastened unduly on the moon chain, and the consequence was an uneven development and a retardation of the evolution of a certain number of diva and human groups. The origin of the feud between the Lords of the Dark Face and the Brotherhood of Light, which found scope for activity in Atlantean days and during the present root race, can be traced back to the moon chain. Basically, what we're experiencing today is the planetary sacral center. It's not a place anywhere, but it's embodied by these materialistic forces. And they use sex to keep humanity dumbed down, to keep humanity unnecessarily focused in that sphere. And that's not just ordinary humanity, that's disciples and aspirants of all kinds. Something to reflect upon there. So we have, if we can make a few more minutes if anyone wants to make any further comments, but as I say, you can go and read the rest of these pages for yourself if you wish to on the video. A lot to take in again, I know. In fact, I realized when I was doing this class that I could have easily made it 2 or 3 classes, like we did with the glamour class, for instance. There was so much to explore there. The great mystery of sex and the law of attraction. All right, then maybe you're all a little bit stunned. Let's leave it at that, shall we? Again, thank you very much, everyone, for staying the course, as they say.